and surrendered my life over to him, I mean, life became life. I felt like I actually woke up or something. I was asleep, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, keeping Jesus in the sports conversation. Here's your host for today's show, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
He is Grant Stuard with the Indianapolis Colts. He's a linebacker there. What's up, Grant? Welcome to Sports Spectrum.
what's going on? Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you. I want to start where we've been starting with most of these podcasts lately, and it's probably where we should always start. It's with Jesus. Tell me about Jesus in the life of Grant Stuard. Who is he to you?
I'll say he's everything. Um, you know, I was asked to give like a one-liner uh, for some of the people that were going to be staying in a house, and they asked me like if I could just give them a one-liner for what he means to me and stuff. And I was saying, without Jesus, nothing matters. And I think that that's speaks into my life in its entirety, with my family, with my career, with just each and every morning we wake up, right? Just because without Jesus and without relationship with God, there's just no purpose, And spent my I spent a good amount of time walking and living my life without Jesus and without a purpose. And so whenever I finally made connection with Him and surrendered my life over to Him, I mean, life became life. I felt like I actually woke up or something. I was asleep,
Yeah.
Um, so for me, He's everything.
When did that happen? When did you surrender your life to Christ?
Uh, September 22nd, 2019. Um, I was in a really dark place, and I, uh, kind of ran into some, I guess you could call it church hurt, um,
Hmm.
and ran into some kind of, uh, I guess, just poor examples of believers around me. Um, and I was really just, moving in a place where there was just no love, no sincerity, and you know, I came to associate those things with God, and eventually disbanded my belief in God, even though I was raised in the church. And I mean, I even sang in the church as a kid, um, but never really had a relationship with Christ. And so I pretty much like just completely abandoned the whole thing altogether, heading into college, um, and kind of just became my own God per se. And I got to a point to where I was trying to change myself for in regards to things on the field, in regards to things off the field. I was trying to be a better student, be a better brother, boyfriend. I was trying to be a better player. I was, like a tweener guy. I was never really getting much play time. And it was all because like I would just flash out at my coaches, that had all these issues with authority, right? My upbringing was really crazy. So
Hmm.
um I was trying to make changes to myself, and I was completely incapable of doing so. Um and so many negative attributes about myself that I knew were negative, that I wanted to change, right? I didn't want to be a lying, manipulative, cheater, habitual excuse maker, like just all these negative things about myself, insecure about everything there is to be insecure about. And I knew that those were issues. I knew I wanted to change them, but I felt like immobilized to it. And within my own will, I couldn't change, and I couldn't like fix myself. And so I kind of got to the point to where I was like, well, let me look back into this whole God, universe, whatever, And so I kind of changed my minor in school to religious studies, and began to just dive into just figure out what's the truth.
Hmm.
There's all this, okay, there's Buddha here, there's the Islam here, and there's the Hindu beliefs here, and then like they have like 80,000 gods. So it's just like, what's really going on? Like, what is the truth, right? And I just remember sitting in my first religious studies class, and I kind of raised my hand. I'm just like, hey, well, not everybody in here is right. We know that, right? you know,
Yeah.
like there has to be something that's correct. And I was, kind of society today kind of has like it seems like they have an issue with objective truth. And that's where I needed that for myself. I'm like, I don't want to do this whole whatever works for you, whatever floats your own boat,
Yeah.
whatever moves your water in the ocean. I wanted to know, like, what is the truth? Who is God really out there? And long story short, through my religious studies, through my academic study, looking at things like the Case for Christ and looking at stuff from Lee Strobel and all these people, and um, academically, scholastically, I understood that Christianity was the only one that kind of stood the test of scholastic study, scientific study, even with the proofs and the manuscripts, and but that still wasn't enough for me to for me to have confidence in the truth and the reality of God and that He loved me and cared about me. So I started to just pray this prayer on a daily basis, pretty much. I was just like, God, if you're there, I just ask that you can reveal yourself to me in a way that I cannot deny, because I want to believe in you. I want to gravitate to something. I just ask that you just reveal yourself to me um, in a way that I just can't deny it. And I don't, looking back on it, there's probably some pride in there, like, oh, you better prove yourself to me or something like that. But I didn't I think the majority of where I was coming from was I really desired to connect with God deep down, because I just felt lonely. I felt empty. Um, and I just knew that, like, if He wasn't there, I mean, I had like one, I guess, attempted, attempt on my own life per se,
Hmm.
just because I was just kind of getting run down by like the whole thing. And I just felt like I was this horrible guy and I was doing nothing but hurting people and setting a horrible example for my siblings that looked up to me. And I couldn't change at all. Um, and on September 22nd, He revealed Himself to me in a way that I absolutely couldn't deny, through a prophetic word, through speaking directly through another individual into exactly what was going on in my life, that He cared about me, that He was there for me, and just told me to continue returning back to Him. And I mean, from that day forward, I began to read His word as the word of God, not as a scholastic book. Um, began to just worship Him and and connect with Him and just build my relationship upon Him. Right, like my walk since then hasn't been perfect. Definitely wasn't perfect there at the beginning, um, but my desire was lit on fire from that day forward, just to continue to connect with Him. And slowly but surely, He began to just yank stuff off of my heart, began to just yank things from. I didn't desire certain things. I didn't desire certain lifestyles. I wasn't okay with being in certain spaces.
Yeah.
My spirit wasn't okay with me making certain mistakes. I started to have this conviction, started to tell everybody about this amazing supernatural experience that I had. People laughing at me like, "What are you talking about?" Um, acting like I'm crazy because I don't want to listen to that music anymore and I don't want to go to that function anymore. And it's
Hmm.
just like, dude, you were the one like inviting all of us to pull up. Now you the one saying like, cut the music off. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, it wasn't a super easy walk when I first started, but I was graced to be able to connect with my wife and find my wife rather quickly after I surrendered my life to Christ, and that just made things so much easier, especially for a young man who I would say biggest vice was his interaction with women. So finding a righteous woman that quickly, I say about 2 months in to my walk with Christ, just made everything clearer and easier. And that's why I proposed and got married so fast, because I just knew I had so much experience with counterfeit relationships, that when I found, another person that was eager to surrender to God and submit to God and to honor God, not just be a Christian, um, it was a no-brainer for me, because I knew that she would be pair really well with me and help, build the kingdom of God with me. So, yes,
Wow.
I would say Jesus was the solution to all that, even the on the field stuff.
Yeah. No, September 22nd, 2019. So you're what? a junior, maybe a sophomore in college. You're a football player. You're also a college student.
Hmm.
You're 20 years old, almost 21, if I'm doing the math correct. And then you get Christ in your life and you find this amazing godly woman. The idols of sports, I think, become temptations for so many athletes, even those the most devout in their faith that I've talked to on this show. How has that been for you now as a professional on still pursuing greatness, trying to be the best that you can be? Obviously, you're at the highest level and you're playing and you're doing well, and that's better than most players, but not letting that become an idol, become the God of your life. How has that been for you in walking with Christ, but also pursuing football on the professional level?
No, for sure. And not to over answer your question, but um, whenever I was, whenever I was younger, right, my mom and my dad were drug addicts. My dad was in jail or prison for, certain bigger or larger chunks of my young life.
Mm.
And even, when he was there and they were together, they still were just kind of absent for me in my life. And so somehow, some way, everybody would show up to this football stuff. Everybody would support me and cheer me on and pat me on the back when I was successful as a 5-year-old on the football field, right? My dad sparingly spent time with me on anything other than something sport related or talent related to my music or football. Like any conversation with my dad was about football or he was making me freestyle rap. Like that was the majority of time spent with my dad or watching a movie. And so for me as a young kid, football was so much more important to me than the average 8-year-old, right? Like you can ask you can ask any of my little league coaches, any of my teammates growing up, if we lost a game or if I played poorly,
Yeah.
I was crying, I threw my helmet on the ground. Uh, what I'm saying? I cared about it so much because for me, I was not loved if I was not successful on this field,
Yeah.
or if I wasn't successful on the track or something like it was just like I didn't feel worthy of love or worthy as an individual if I wasn't successful in my sport. And it was the only time I was supported, and that was my why. Period. That was my why until about high school, where I kind of began to have the wherewithal to where it was like, oh, like okay, like maybe my parents kind of have an issue, or maybe there's like an issue with them, and I can't allow football to like be how they love me. It just became less important once you go to high school and it's like, oh, like the girls and oh, you can go D1 and oh, now you're cool or you're lame just based upon how good you are at sports, especially in Texas high school football. So I kind of transitioned my why per se within the sport into popularity, into being a cool guy and again, just continuing to like build up my self-worth in this game. And that maintained my why throughout the entirety of high school. And it did encourage me to do well on the field. But it definitely was misplaced in the order of what was important, right? It shouldn't have been at the top, but it was certainly the most important thing in my life because I felt like, oh, if I don't have offers, if I don't post them on Twitter, then the girl at the Woodlands High School is not gonna see me as like cool as the kids. It was just real, like that's the reality of what it was. And then the respect of my peers, and like I said, I was very insecure about myself and in my life. So like football for me, that wasn't idle. And so
Yeah.
when I got to college, um, it kind of maintained that for the first couple years, and then I realized um, I needed this football game to be able to best properly in the quickest fashion that I wanted to be able to provide for my siblings and to adopt them and to, do what I said when I was a young kid to them and say, hey, we're going to get out of this. I'm gonna make sure we get out of this situation. I'm gonna provide for us. And I used to have little conversations like that as a young kid. And I knew that football was needed for that. So then I started just playing football for that purpose, and
Yeah.
kind of thinking like, I got to do this. I got to get it out the mud so I can adopt my siblings. I got to have money and all this. And the NFL is the easiest way to get there. Um, and like I said, it did kind of leak into my professional career super early on because I felt once I did adopt my sister and once she did come and live with me and my wife, and then had to get enrolled in school, that was a completely crazy ordeal because, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I mean, I was the last pick
Yep.
in a draft, and my sister's going into her senior year of high school, and she's enrolling in school at like the beginning of August. And me and cuts aren't made until around the end of August.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost all chips on the table. I got to make this team, or either I'm going to be somewhere else while she's in high school in Tampa, Florida, or she's going to have to switch schools again in the middle of the year, then maybe again if I get cut from that team. And, there was like a sense of urgency for like stability in our house. And I felt like football was that answer. And so it did add kind of some stress variables to my life. And it began to just still kind of be an idol per se in that perspective of me just not ordering things the right way. And so it wasn't until about the midway of my rookie season to where I started to kind of find that balance and started to kind of understand what was important, and kind of being that brother dad thing to my sister and still being a good husband at home, and understanding that those two things were way more important than anything I did on the field. And that my home ministry and my ministry between me and my wife is the most important ministry in my life. Even more important than the ministry of, me out there on the field or any platform I can be built up to talk to people just from my efforts on the field.
Yeah.
And so for me, kind of going into year 2 and going into year 3, the game of football kind of shifted in my mind and really in my heart, to just kind of being like that thing that allows me to have the resources, and that allows me to, gift me with the platforms where people want to hear what I have to say, to make me that much more effective when I'm talking to younger kids or when I'm talking to high school boys, about Jesus and about building a real relationship with Christ. It makes me that much more effective, and even if it's just one person that I can affect because, NFL player, so cool or something.
Hmm.
I don't take that for granted at all. And I think that at this point, that's where I feel like the purpose is for me here, right? Because, going in a year 2, I struggled finding purpose in the game. I almost like thought about retiring after my rookie year because all of the goals that I set out to achieve through football had been achieved, right? I was able to help my mom get off of drugs, found a facility and partnered with them. And she went through the whole rehabilitation, and now she's having a great life. She's building her relationship with Christ, being a mom again, and adopted my sister. My brother's doing well. I'm married, and I
Hmm.
got a home. So like all these things that I had set in mind of I have to play football to achieve these things. At one point, all of those goals I had were achieved.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, I was cool with that. Like I didn't really desire anything more from the game of football. It was like, well, I have a family, everything's going well. I have a home, my mom's doing good, and I feel like I had something to do with that. And so I was cool. And so football began to kind of feel like, okay, so why am I hitting people in the face now? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's the purpose now? um, and so it wasn't until after my rookie year when I got to go back and speak to kids at my high school, and do some Instagram ministry stuff, just sharing stuff on my feed and having dialogue with people. Is that realizing that like, oh, people are willing to hear me because I'm a football player first, but then that allows me to have the platform to tell them about what's actually important. And I think it hits that much harder because as a young kid, you want money, power, success. Um, And when you see somebody that has that and they're telling you the most important thing is Jesus Christ, it changes your perspective. And I never had everybody telling me about Jesus was like my grandfather and them,
Hmm.
you know. So not to say it was, I definitely heard it. It was subliminally effective, but it never forced me to deal with the reality of my thoughts of, no, I gotta have all the money, power, and success. That's what's most important. Then for somebody that already had everything that I was desiring, telling me that they would trade it any day of the week for a real relationship with Jesus Christ. I think it's a, it's a life shifter. If you can really grasp that, if you can really hear that from somebody, and so
Yeah.
I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to talk to people and they feel that way and say that stuff to me, and I'm like, wow, like I guess this is the reason I'm playing. This is the reason I'm doing this, and so that's the reason I was, excited about getting on this, So
Yeah. Well, you could host your own podcast, bro. You should, if you haven't done that, thought about that yet, because you got a lot to say and you've had a lot of life experience at such a young age, just 25, or soon to be 25 as we record this,
yeah.
Grant Stuard. Let me ask you about this musical career. You talked about your dad. Um,
Hmm.
having you freestyle rap when you were a kid, which
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
hear that, it makes me understand who G-Steezo, I think that's how you pronounce it,
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And this first single, you released your first single. It's called Empty. And a lot of what you just shared, as I went and listened to the song a couple times before we talked here, and I thought, this is deep. This is powerful. And using hip hop to point to Christ, that's awesome. And it was very much in the vein of a Lecrae or somebody like that that I've heard before. But it's a really good song, but it's pretty deep, man. So where does this musical career come to play where you realize it's one thing to just freestyle rap with your buddies or your father, but it's another thing to actually
Mhm.
go and produce a single and release it. So talk about that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, so music has always been huge in my life. It's always been the way that I feel uh lifted up.
Yeah.
And the first time I felt the presence of God was during worship at a large church in Houston called Hope City Church way back in like early 2019.
Hmm.
Um, and so for me, music is always like, you're always listening to it, and I always wanted to participate in it. I was in choir and I was in theater, and I played the drums growing up. I loved the musical aspect of church, right? My dad and my dad's side of the family, that's it's like this like southern, black, authentic, uh soulful church experience that I guess is really highlighted in the whole music scene.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's I don't like growing up. I didn't listen to nothing the pastor was saying. I'm just waiting on praise and testimony because that was my opportunity to engage in the music. Right, I always kind of really liked music, and you know, my dad, would rap, and he would always be listening to Lecrae and things like that. And so he got kind of exposed me to that at a young age, regardless of how everybody was living their lives and everything that was going on around me. I did have that music in my ears, and I did have that music in my space, and it it always kind of like I always kind of thought about it per se. I was never a kid that just completely abandoned the belief in God's existence ever at a young age, regardless of what was going on, just because I was always listening to like that music and always singing that music. And even though I didn't have any personal relationship,
Right.
even just being around that, I think is kind of what just kind of carried me, and that didn't just make me just completely fall off the rails as a kid. But yeah, man, G-Steezo came about honestly with my teammates at the Indianapolis Colts. Um, like it just was like a nickname that came about. I think actually I was playing the game of Madden my rookie year when I first got on the Madden game, and I didn't like calling my character Grant Stuard, so I called him like G Steezy, like different variations of G Steezy. I call him the Steezmeister, right? I was like, oh yeah, the Steezmeister at it again, like when I'm playing the game.
That doesn't sound like a good
Um,
rap name though, Grant. I'm just saying.
no, not at all. And so yeah, my teammates kind of just call me Steez or G-Steezo or just G. And so I guess when I was kind of trying to develop like, okay, well, what do I want to be like called or something? Do I desire to be called something? I just feel like my last name, people be saying Stroud or misspelling it or saying it. So
Yeah.
I wanted it to kind of be simpler. So I went with G-Steezo. I thought it was most authentic to me, and try my best to make the music really authentic to me. And the music thing kind of really going into my rookie year, I just really was just making music to express myself, and wanted to get back into the studio because my dad used to bring me to the studio and stuff like that, but we never like executed and finished anything. It was always just like I'd go in there and see all the stuff and sing a couple things, but we never like put anything out or anything like that. It was real low budget, kind of just messing around. um, but so when I had the opportunity to work with people and create something, I really just did it to express myself. And I had friends that were like, "Hey man, send me that song. I really want to like listen to that. That's speaking to me." Um, now I kind of am making the music once again to express myself, but also to glorify God and to honor Him, but hopefully to inspire somebody else. Or if there's somebody that, maybe has gone through something I've gone through or is going through something I've gone through, hopefully this music can connect with them, and then they'll be able to, find a solution that's described in my music as Jesus Christ. Um, I think that's always the goal. And I've received a few messages since I've put out the song, and a lot of people that probably wouldn't listen to that type of music reach out to me and just, man, I wasn't even knowing what to expect hearing that, and it really made me think about God, and I've been feeling that exact same way. It's really been a blessing and an honor that I feel like God is kind of using me in the music space, even on a small scale. So
And you want to
I'm
pursue
hopeful.
that
Yeah.
more, right? Would you like to pursue that more? Once football's done, is that something you could dive even more into, or even while you're still playing?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm sitting on like a whole album, honestly.
Okay. Okay.
I just the timing, and it's like, they're already planned in like some of the meetings and in the locker room. So I'm like, just release the album, and then everybody's gonna be talking about it. I really feel like I'm kind of low key, and I don't want to be a superstar or be paid for it or anything like that.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I do aspire to release this first album, pretty relatively, probably before 2024, so probably within this season.
Nice.
And just, yeah, continue to just kind of pursue the musical space. I don't know if there's like a career or something like that I would want to do, just because for me it's always kind of been kind of a side thing or something I just really enjoying to do to express myself in my free time. But I do think it's an effective ministry. I think it's been one of the most effective ministries in my life, like to me. So I definitely am going to continue to pursue that until I think God directs me elsewhere.
Hmm. Grant Stuard is joining us here on Sports Spectrum from the Indianapolis Colts. It's funny, your song, what we were just talking about, the name of the single is Empty, which is very personal. It sounds like it's a very personal story, and just how God can redeem us and even be with us in that dry season. But the word empty, another word for empty, could actually be irrelevant, which I think is interesting, given the title in 2021, Grant Stuard was Mr. Irrelevant with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, last pick drafted in the 2021 draft. Everybody remembers Brock Purdy in 2022, but it was you, Grant Stuard, in 2021. Pretty cool to see two guys who are making it in the league, who are Mr. Irrelevant. What do you think about that time? You were traded in 22 to the Colts, but in describing your NFL career, because that word, we were talking about, it was interesting to listen to you as a kid talk about how much football was about pleasing others, earning love, earning approval. And there you are, slapped with a label. I mean, you're so probably thankful and glad that you're drafted, but the label is Mr. Irrelevant. Kind of talk through what that was like being drafted, but being that last pick and kind of having to hear that label a little bit thrown to you?
Yo, I was so confused. Like,
Yeah,
the
aren't you supposed to be
draft,
happy? You know?
yeah, like, and it took so long to announce my pick, and it just was, it was crazy. The draft was crazy. I wasn't able to run a 40 at pro day because I had to have hip surgery, and I
Hmm.
tore my hamstring or pulled my hamstring like twice right before the Senior Bowl. So I wasn't really the player that I could be at the Senior Bowl, but I just needed to go and just be out there and get in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and so it just was a real trial period for me in that space. But I will say that was the time that my wife and I were really close with God, in that whole little space. And so when the draft came about, I kind of had this inclination that I was going to be undrafted just because it was like, all right, 5'11" and some change, 230 pounds because I drank 2 gallons of water before the weigh in. And, I did like 30 reps on the bench press because my arms are short, right? And
Hmm.
it's just like, I didn't do anything else. like I didn't jump because if I would have jumped, it wouldn't have been high. So I just didn't jump. I didn't run because I just came off my hip surgery. And I felt like they knew I was fast. If anything, I'm fast.
Yep.
Um, and I wasn't expecting to get drafted. All these teams were telling me, "Hey, we don't think we're going to draft you, but you know, we're going to offer you something in free agency." I had like something between 28 and 30 offers in free agency going into the seventh round, right? So like the morning of day three, I get calls from teams at like 7 in the morning, different GMs telling me how much they love me. Hopefully they'll be able to draft me here in the next few rounds. I already kind of knew that rundown. They're only saying that to soften you up. So when you're not drafted, it's like, oh, we weren't able to get you, man. Sorry. But let's give you, 50,000 guaranteed, and you'll probably make the team here. So I
Yeah.
was kind of hearing some of those things go on, and there was a few teams that I felt like actually would draft me because they hadn't drafted any linebackers. They talked to me all the time. Special teams coaches seemed like they loved me. Everything was really positive. In all the pre-draft stuff in the seventh round, I remember there was a team, the Broncos, had like 3 or 4 picks. Hold on, had like 3 or 4 picks in the seventh round, and they didn't draft me.
Yeah.
And so I was at a loss for words at that point. Like when the Broncos came off the board, I had this big draft party, all my family here, and it's just like I don't think I'm going. And then um, the Giants called me, and I had already told everybody if I didn't get drafted, I was going to the Giants. That was what it was. They're going to give me the most guaranteed, and their head coach at the time, Joe Judge, was talking to me damn near every day, spending a lot of time with me, told me he wasn't going to draft me, told me he was going to draft straight O lineman or something because they only had 3 picks. They couldn't go linebacker. And he wanted to get me, and we are going to be together for a decade. There was like this whole narrative, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going
Yeah.
to go be a Giant in New Jersey. Kind of gross, but whatever, right? Um, it just wasn't inspiring because like I had to provide for my sister, and I'm just like, I don't know anything about New Jersey, and it's just like, what's getting a house there? Is that realistic? What's it was just like, I can't have a backyard, I have a dog. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's true to this day. But I wasn't excited about that. So I called the Giants, told them I'd go there, made a deal with the Giants, and I'm kind of like, oh, with my family, like, we were so happy. Like, but I really wasn't, and nobody was like super excited. And they kind of like were consoling me, but not trying to show it. It was like a real somber feeling. Um, but a couple of days before that, my friend who just called me a second ago, it's just crazy.
Hmm.
His name's Anthony. He told me that God told him that I was going to be drafted, and I'm just like, I appreciate it, bro. Like, cool, But he was like, no, you're gonna be drafted here in a couple of days. And I was like, okay. Um, and I didn't take that as a prophetic word or anything. I just kind of felt like he was really thinking I was going to get drafted, and uh, you know, second to last pick, I'm still watching the TV because I'm trying to see if one of my friends goes. He goes second to last pick. I'm like, oh, that's awesome for him. And the Buccaneers come up on the clock. And at this point, I'm getting call after call after call after call, but they're not draft calls. These are scouts and GMs and head coaches asking me to sign free agency.
Yeah.
and they're all competing and they're all kind of going through my agent, and some of them are getting mad at me because I didn't know how much the deal was. And I'm like, no, I'm going to New York, and so Tampa Bay's calling me. I don't even know they have the last pick because the pick's not even on the screen. They're like doing some weird like presentation thing. I'm like, what's going on? And so I get a call from Tampa, and the first thing they say is like, at least the first thing I can hear or something is like, hey, do you know where you're going in free agency? Or something about free agency. All I heard was free agency. And I was about to respond, and they were like, well, you don't have to figure that out anymore. We're going to take you right here with, pick number 3,000, whatever it was. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And at this point, the Broncos has already kind of told me they were going to draft me, or like, yeah, we're going to get you here in the 7th. And they didn't draft me. And, another GM from another team said that we're going to try to get you here in day 3. You're the GM. What do you mean you're going to try? Right. And so I was like, I didn't even start crying or celebrate or anything because I didn't see my name on the TV. So I'm like, look, when I see my name on the TV, we're going to celebrate. But
Right.
I mean, and
Yep.
I'm talking to the coaches. I'm telling them, thank you. My family's making noise in the background. But I'm like, when I see my name on the TV, then I can be present with you, lady on the phone, whomever it was. The lady probably trying to schedule my flight and all that. And they did this big presentation, Mr. Irrelevant, all this type of stuff. And they said my name, my face came on the screen, and it was crazy. I mean, we started screaming, I started crying. I was so grateful.
Yeah.
I was so happy to be going somewhere like Florida where it just kind of made a little bit more sense. It was more familiar to us. It was just exactly what was needed for that year, for that time. God knew exactly what he was doing. And, that was one of the only teams like I just never talked to during the whole pre-draft process. And it was crazy. And I want to say they weren't even like, I didn't get to talk to nobody at the Senior Bowl because of something that was going on with like the Super Bowl that year. So, I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. And, the whole Mr. Relevant thing was kind of chip on my shoulder because it was like going into training camp. It's like you're treated like an undrafted guy, but your teammates don't treat you like an undrafted guy. So you'd be like trying to have those conversations with the undrafted guy, like, yeah, bro, you know, y'all big money over there. And he'd be like, no, Grant, you big money too. It's like, no, I'm with y'all. It's like, it was like this really weird like place.
Yeah.
But I kind of already had an undrafted mindset as far as I got to go earn a spot on this team. They drafted a linebacker before me in the 5th. So, by the grace of God, I was able to do that and stay healthy and make the squadron over there. And kind of that whole year was just kind of like proving, I guess, my relevancy on that team and that I was a, player that could play at this level. There was all these questions about my size and my length and my ability to play in space. And my rookie year was really the year of, I guess, just kind of eliminating that moniker from actually being who I was,
Mm-hmm. So when you get
So yeah.
traded, which is interesting because then a year later you're traded, and being traded, I think, is a real, I don't know, it's just fascinating to look at from a perspective of, okay, being traded means you're uprooting, you're going somewhere, most of the time against your will. I'm not saying that you were unhappy or whatever, but it's like, okay, now you're on a new team again a year later. But being traded, there's something about it because the Colts clearly wanted you. They traded for you. So there's something about that too, that, hey, this team really wants me, and went out there. When you get to Indianapolis and you're adapting to a different team in year 2, and now you're in year 3. So you're your first time in your NFL career that you're with the same team back-to-back years, and you're starting to settle in and play and have a good impact with the team. But what was that like, kind of acclimating yourself in year 2 to Indianapolis? And let's talk more from a spiritual perspective, for trusting God to know that his plan is perfect and he's bringing you here for a reason. Just what was that time like for you?
It was very trying.
Yeah, I would
It was
imagine.
very
Yeah.
it was very trying. It was very weird. Um, to put it in easier perspective, it was like when I got to Indy, I was 223 pounds. When I left, I was 38 by the end of the season. It was a very weird time. um,
Yeah.
you know, during like 3 days into training camp in Tampa Bay, my wife was anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks pregnant.
Hmm.
And second day into training camp, and I'm getting this call from my sister like 5 in the morning. I'm about to go into the facility, and she's like telling me my wife is screaming, she's in pain, and I'm just like, what? And I'm like, they're going to the hospital. So I end up going to the hospital with them, and she pretty much ends up pushing out the baby. I obviously way too early, and the baby, wasn't alive.
Yeah.
And it was like so strange, and like you couldn't even like properly like mourn or properly process, because it was like I had to go right back to work. Like
Right.
I have to. And everybody was like, all my teammates were like, Grant, you don't have to go to work. Like, think about how well you played your rookie year. I was third in the whole NFL in special teams tackles. I broke all these, I was like the most special teams tackles that any Buccaneers had since like 2011 or something crazy. So there's, nobody's cutting you, Grant. You're fine. You know, um, and but going to work, it was like I couldn't concentrate. And then I was just coming back from like my final hip surgery, God willing, after my rookie year. And it was just like, yeah, I had, there was like a role I was supposed to like fill and like fall into. And I just didn't really fall into that role, kind of, wasn't really playing well defensively in Tampa in camp. And then I pulled my hamstring going into the first preseason game where I'm supposed to be getting like all the reps to show them I can play on defense. Pull my hamstring like the third play tackling one of the running backs after they catch the ball, Sonny Michel. Pulled my hamstring on some fluke stuff, and still got to be with the team. Still can't really process the loss with my wife, and then as soon as preseason's over, it's almost like a breath of fresh air because I'm about to get to just go home and be with my wife and process this and be there for her. And then, I get a call thinking I'm thinking I'm surely making this team, just because of just what I've done my rookie year. My rookie year, I mean, I don't think there's anybody in I didn't think there was anybody in that whole NFC that was as good as I was on special teams that year.
Sure.
There's a guy on the Saints that did really well, but he was a gunner that wasn't comparable to me. And I get this call from somebody in personnel like, hey, I need you to come up here. And I'm like, come up there. I'm getting cut? What's going on? And he's like, between me and you, you're getting traded. Hung the phone up. So I'm just like, what? And so I get up there and, to have a conversation with the general manager. Most of the coaches around there are shocked, and they didn't even know. My special teams coach was most people there were just like, huh? And in disagreement with, I guess, the move. And I talked to the general manager, and he's not telling me where I'm getting traded. He doesn't say a team name. The whole conversation, he's like, great leadership down there already. Great coach and Bubba Ventrone. Got no clue who this guy is. He said it like he was saying Bill Belichick, right? And I mean, now I know Bubba Ventrone, one of the best special teams coaches in the NFL, but I wasn't paying attention to that as a rookie. Tell me where I'm going, but I didn't want to be like, where am I going? Because I didn't want to make like my agent look unprofessional or something. And I just like, yes, sir, I appreciate the opportunity, appreciate you believing in me. And, there was kind of like a grain of salt. It was like, all right, at least the other team wants me,
Right.
Traded some picks for me and stuff like that. And so coming to Indianapolis was different, culture completely different, players completely different. The role that was set for me was completely different. The standard for me was so much higher because I'm supposed to be like this special teams guy.
Yeah.
That's like we traded for you. You're supposed to come in and dominate. So it was kind of weird. And I was a rookie the year before, and I didn't really have a lot of tools, a lot of understanding of scheme. I kind of was just out there running around hitting folks. So coming into year two was just kind of a big learning process of learning little intricacies of special teams, learning little tools for me to use physically. And as I gained weight, kind of from just sitting around, not really depressed, but just kind of, I was in a weird space mentally.
Mm.
Especially, I tore my pec in a Tennessee game, so I got sat down for 3 weeks. So it just was like that whole time frame. That when I actually tore my pec, allowed me to have like 2 weeks where I didn't have to travel with the team. So my wife and I got to go to a church here in a town called Whitestown, Indiana,
Yeah.
um, and go to this church called Traders Point, and just really felt like a new spiritual boost. Cried for the first time with my wife just about the loss. Took that long for me to process it, kind of like a spiritual reset per se. And everything from that point on has just been, really, really good for us here in Indiana. So glad to be here, and that period I think was really needed. And like I said, right, it's just has helped me learn to trust God with the process of things. Because when I look back at the things I didn't understand, why am I getting drafted last? Why don't I get to pick where I'm going if I'm going to be drafted last? And why am I getting traded from this nice, cool climate, amazing warm climate when I just bought a home and my sisters and my mom's in Tampa getting clean, and now I'm going to Indiana? What's going on? And what happened with the baby that I thought I was supposed to have, that I felt like I had a dream kind of confirming that it was time for us to have a baby, and then baby doesn't like come. Um, and just so like now looking back at all that and seeing how God has worked and how God has allowed certain things to take place in order for what was necessary. Like now I'm in this whole other state while my sister's in college in Florida because she started community college in Florida because we were in Florida. Why
Right.
else would she be there? We're from Texas. But now seeing how that's allowed her to establish her independence and start to grow into a young woman that she wasn't forced to grow into when she was living with us. She's going on 20, 19 years old. So her like having to, figure that out for herself has, I've been able to see her just grow. And that's because I'm here in Indiana. If I was in Florida, she'd be handicapped. Um,
That's good.
and so I just learned to trust God through that process, made me closer to him, made me just seek his will way more, right? Like instead of thinking, oh, this is what I'm gonna do, this is my plan, this is this, it's made me be able to be like, God, what do you desire for me to do? Um, what do you desire for me to do in this specific situation? How can I be a better friend to my friends? How can I be a better husband to my wife? Because it's kind of helped me understand that throughout the whole course of this thing, my wife is here, my family's here, God is here, and those are the things that matter. So just made me hone in on that stuff.
Yeah, there's so much life that you've lived just in the past 3 years. When you think about, I mean, certainly in your whole life with your parents and adopting your sister, and just so much that the Lord has kind of, I'll say, put you through. After you get to Indy, and obviously you go through what you went through just getting to Indy, so much of this Christian walk is about discipleship, right? And it's about staying connected to people who can help you become the best version of yourself and help you grow in your relationship with Christ. What does that look like for you today? So we're talking to you in the middle of the season here. What's discipleship look like for Grant Stuard day to day, week to week? It could even just be your own time with God, but how are you staying connected to him when you're in the midst of a long season?
Man, I feel like staying connected to him for me is on a daily basis. I have to be doing something um, to actively connect with him because nothing in my life kind of allows for that passive time to just kind of fall into your lap. So I mean, for me, it's things like texting my pastor from the church that I had that experience at in 2019. That kind of really is my home church in Spring, Texas.
Hmm.
I'll text them at like 10 p.m. when I'm about to go to sleep, like, hey, can I call you tomorrow morning at 6:30 in the morning? And he'll text me back, yeah. And so I'll call him on the way to work. make sure that I'm being pastored, make sure that I'm, being held accountable. Probably do that once a week. And then for me, it's like, whether it's listening to a YouTube video of, even if it's people arguing something theological, or watching, somebody share the gospel with somebody else, and just something I can passively kind of drive, right? Different podcasts and stuff like that. That's what I really try to use my drive time to kind of receive the word of God, hear the word of God, be reminded of the word of God, be reminded of what God is doing today, and try to make a time to make sure I'm personally getting in the word. And for me, sometimes that's just worshiping, just worshiping and staying connected with him, because, music is always, and it's kind of been how I connect. So I've been taking some guitar lessons, because I've felt
Okay.
like guitar is the most dexterous. Is that the right word? It has the most dexterity of all the instruments, in my humble opinion. I can crank it out and play right now. I can play over there. I can take it to Alaska and play that. I don't need no electricity or anything.
Yep.
And so I've been trying to learn that, just to kind of help usher in the presence and spirit of God through music, kind of wherever I go. So that's kind of the goal for me musically right now, more so than the album or anything like that. But yeah, so for me, that's kind of how I try to stay connected to him and make sure I'm continuing to build my faith. And last season I had like every like Saturday morning or Tuesday night, I would get on like a Zoom call with some of my friends from high school, and we kind of have little Bible studies and stuff like that, held each other accountable. So getting that back started up this week, actually, with my guys back home. But the most difficult thing for me is discipleship in that locker room.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Unless you stick with the guys that are like you, that's easy, right? Kickers can talk to snappers, snappers talk to kickers, quarterbacks talk to O-linemen, right? I'm part of multiple different races. I can talk about various different things. But like, for instance, Kirk Cousins is somebody that I look at and I see the active ministry, and just from the way he lives, right? He probably doesn't even know who I am. He might, because of that Vikings game. But anyways, he really is able to walk his life out and live in a way that where people feel that they can like come to him and say things to him or ask him questions. But I imagine it might be a little bit easier for him to talk to his center versus talking to the corner from Florida with gold teeth in his mouth. It's a different thing.
Sure.
It's a different relatability factor. So for me, it's tough, right? I've always kind of been between two cultures, being black and white. I've always kind of been between, two different kind of spaces, and where do I belong? And so that's like, and then coming to Indiana in a new locker room, it was like, how am I going to come into this new locker room in this new space and be like, everybody in here needs to believe in Christ right now,
Yeah.
So, because that's kind of what type of time I was on in Tampa, because I had a good relationship with everybody in there. Everybody kind of knew what I stood on, how I felt. And I was able to share my beliefs and share the truth of God and the love of God with those people, because I had relationships with them. But it was so different coming into a space where I didn't have those relationships. So I'm simultaneously, it's like I want to be liked. I want to have friends.
Yeah.
I want to be respected as a teammate, as a player. But at the same time, I cannot let that and all of those factors override my purpose and override my calling, which is to make sure I'm honoring God in every little conversation, which is a lot harder than you think in a locker room.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
Yeah.
for sure. And then it's like honoring him in every little conversation, but then at the same time, being ready at the snap of a finger for somebody to press that button and ask you that question in front of a whole bunch of people who maybe they have that question, but they seem too cool to ask you that question in front of everybody else. And like it goes from joking to like, so wait, how come God not a woman? and now it's 10 people looking at you because you're supposed to be the Christ man or something,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And now you got to answer this question of, well, women give birth, so how come God not a woman? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like just random stuff like that, because you're supposed to be the guy that believes in God, that shares the gospel, that shares his testimony. And it's like you got to be ready for things like that. You have to be equipped for things like that. But it's also you're grateful that people see you as that guy. So then it's like a standard that you have to uphold all the time, all the places, if your desire is really to reach those people. So that's definitely been by far the most challenging discipleship, the most challenging thing. And what's been most effective for me is building the relationships, building the friendships and the connections with individuals so that they know more than anything else I care about them. More than anything else, they can rely on me.
Yeah.
More than anything else, I'm a man of integrity, that I'm not going to lie to your face. Or if I say that I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Or if I say that I care about you, my actions follow through. Or if, a guy, if Jason Kelsey comes and hits my guy in the back of the head on a cheap shot, that I'm going to get off the sideline and run over there in my guy's defense, even though I can't fight anybody. I don't have no fighting skills, and I'm a very small guy in comparison to the defensive and offensive lineman that I ran up to and started, running my mouth. But, those are the things that in this locker room have been necessary for me to establish the relationship with them. You can trust me. I care about you. I love you. I care about your success for your family. So then if I am making an attempt to make you think about something, or if I'm making an attempt to maybe hold you accountable, if I ask you a question like, you're wearing a cross necklace, what does that mean to you? Then it's not like I'm just some random guy, like on, that's trying to force something on somebody without any prior relationship. There's only certain coaches that can cuss me out without me with me saying yes sir and shutting my mouth.
Yeah.
But the only coaches that can do that with me are coaches that have a relationship with me, that I know care about me, that I know are only saying what they're saying because they want me to succeed, or chewing me out because I made a mistake, but I know their intentions behind it. And so for me, it's been important to establish those relationships with guys organically.
Yeah.
So that they know that if I'm saying anything, right, if I'm saying, when are you going to marry her? Like
Yeah.
that could be very pressing, that can be like, why are you in my business? But it's like, okay, you guys are living together. You guys are wanting to have kids. When are you going to marry her? You know what God says about X, Y, and Z? Okay. If I don't have any relationship with that guy, that's going to offend him.
That's right.
People don't like being held accountable to begin with. It's difficult as a human being, or people don't like the idea of sin, or the idea of sin being brought to light, and kind of exposed and discussed. And so I think it's important to establish that individual relationship and to make sure you do everything with love and kindness, and do everything with the intention of ushering the connection between that soul and the maker of that soul, right? Because it's like, it's not about you having the understanding and having the head knowledge, and you need to be a Christian and get baptized today, and you need to do all of the things that God is requiring of you right now since you're calling yourself a Christian. But for me, I've realized that the closer you get to God, the more you feel called to live like him and get closer to him. And if you're trying to do it the other way around and minister to other people, telling them to fix their lives and get their life together before you're talking to them about just building that relationship with God, like, hey, did you pray about that? Are you talking to God about that? God is real and he cares about you and he loves you. And this is right after y'all were just having a conversation over, who was more attractive on Instagram.
Hmm.
So it's like
Yeah.
not me per se, but like that's the space you're operating in. So you can't, right? Christ, the word of God is like a sword, right? So it's like you can't just, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like a strategy. But
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, bringing in that piercing word of God in a space where nobody knows your intentions, or in a space where the opposite is being discussed 24/7. um People can't think that you're judging them. People can't think that you think that you're better than them. So it's like, then you have that opportunity to share, like, nah, bro, like, I was struggling with that same thing before.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in that same boat. Actually, I still struggle with that same thing before. Maybe I don't carry it to the degree that I used to, but I still struggle with that same thing, and I found the solution, not my personal solution, but the solution to that is relationship with God. And what do you think about that? Can I share something with you? Like, do you read your Bible? They were having all these different conversations. Um, Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's like, and then you may be interacting in a conversation that maybe you had no business interacting in, and then there's a guy on the other side of the locker room. Why are you talking about that? Ain't you Mr. Bible Man? Now it's like, but it's like you can get caught up in wanting the camaraderie and just wanting to be, you know, a part of what's going on. And there's nobody looking at you, holding you accountable. It's, what I'm saying? But um, that's what I'm saying. It's been the most challenging and also the most rewarding, right? Like,
Yeah.
I had a guy call me that is no longer with the Colts, that had a couple stints with other teams, and he was only with us for about maybe like 7 or 8 weeks. Kind of, he was here, then he was off the team, he was P squad, then he was back on active, and I wasn't super close friends with him, but I maybe went to lunch with him twice. But he reached out to me, sending me a picture of him in the off season of him getting baptized, and he told me that I was a huge part of that.
Amazing.
And I was just like, all glory to God. Like, that is wonderful that he felt like he could use me to help somebody else, because I know how life changing that is. And I know how amazing that is when you finally give your life to Christ and begin to walk with Christ. And what a lot of people don't understand, if, you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, or if, you feel like you're just a Christmas, Easter Christian, or whatever it is like, it's not like it's not like this religious ceremony, or now I'm living my life right and I have all these things figured out. But the best I've heard it called is relationship with Christ, because you start to walk with him and engage with him on a daily basis. And it feels like I'm no longer alone in this battle, in this fight, right? Because life is a fight. Temptation and sin and flesh is always going to be a fight. But the biggest thing about Jesus is, like, for me, is like, I'm no longer alone.
Yeah.
Like, I'm with him for eternity, right? It says that he's the Alpha and the Omega, and he trumps everything else, right? So any stronghold, anything I'm struggling with, any depression, any anxiety has to bow to him, right? And I figure out the only time where I do fall into temptation, or I do fall into that pride, or I do fall into whatever it is that I might be struggling with at that moment, is because I failed to call on him. Because if I do try it on my own, I might succeed twice out of 10, but it's not set up. This life is not set up for us to just succeed spiritually without him, because, he's got the keys to everything, and he wants us to have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, that's been the biggest thing I've tried to talk about, and kind of just, sometimes the best thing you can do discipleship wise is just live your life in a way that people see as God honoring. So when they do have a question, or if they do kind of see your life and he has something, what does he have? And that's been what I've graced to be able to experience with my sister. Just kind of her watching my wife and I, and now she texts me telling me she wants to be baptized. I'm just like, oh my goodness,
Praise
this is
God.
great. I didn't I didn't force her to go to church. There was many times we went to church without her. I said, "Hey, you want to go?" No, I don't. Okay, cool. And I'm gonna still love her and care for her and read the scripture with her, pray with her and for her. But yeah, that's probably
Hmm.
the best little rundown I can give you on my
Well,
locker room discipleship.
what I hear on your part is people aren't going to care about what you know until they know that you care. I say that a lot. People will not care about what Grant Stuard knows until they know that he cares for them. And I think that's in relationships in general, but especially as people of faith. If you want to share your faith, which I think all of us have a desire to do, we have to remember that if we start forcing stuff on people, especially people we don't know, it just becomes divisive. And I think we've seen a lot of that in our culture where people are telling others they have to believe this, they have to believe that, but you don't even know the person. Get to know them, get to understand them, get to understand their background, get to look at Grant Stuard and see this guy who has been through a lot. Let's just say, I could say hell and back, but it sounds like you've been through a lot and you're here and yet you're still trusting in God. So Grant, listen, this has been awesome. Real quick, give a short, quick snippet on stewardship, the Stewardship Foundation. I want to make sure we get a plug in that before we say goodbye.
No, for sure. The Stewardship Foundation is something that my wife and I started, theoretically started back in college with various little food drives and school supply drives. And, the Stewardship Foundation just kind of speaks to everything that I struggled with as a kid, via the resources I needed to succeed in school, or just food, or how difficult it was for my mom to get the help that she needed with drug addiction, um, because of the kind of systems that are in place with drug and alcohol rehabilitation, with the government, medical care, and all of the type of things. It kind of makes it to where, like, if you're not, very financially well off, it's very hard for you to get effective care long term.
Sure.
And so the Stewardship Foundation kind of exists to kind of uh, merge the gap per se, or make the gap small, um, fix those problems, and really just to I like what Dalton Reisner said in regards to his foundation. It just kind of uh, making Christ known by everything that we do, and make Christ known by the way that we love and by the way that we serve and care for other people. So the Stewardship Foundation kind of just operates kind of holistically, not really narrowed down into any specific field or anything like that, but it's kind of just been like, we do various things, just kind of like providing those resources, whether it's food, scholarships, free football camps, just kind of all of those things. But through each and every one of those things, it's important that we provide the word of God and that we make Christ known in that by the way that we love and care for people through the foundation. So yeah, kind of just kind of getting it off the ground right now. And so really thankful for all the people that have kind of partnered with us to help us, do certain events. We had a couple football camps, had a back to school drive right before my rookie year. And so just kind of looking to do more stuff, both in the community back home in Houston, but also in the Indianapolis community, kind of getting into when it gets cold and stuff like that, just kind of some of the needs for the homeless in the area,
Hmm.
and the at-risk youth that are just kind of in the area, just providing them with resources, food, and, the gospel. And so that's kind of what the foundation exists for. And, everything I'm doing musically, any proceeds from the music are going fully to the foundation. And I think it's super cool how the NFL kind of matches kind of any donations that are kind of made to foundation. So excited about kind of doing that this upcoming year, because I'm really trying to have like two or three $5,000 scholarships for kids, like to go to school. Just because I just know how difficult it is, to kind of get that done without the proper financial things, even just room and like just finding somewhere to stay and having the food to kind of survive as a college kid. So just looking forward to doing some of that. Just taking some examples from guys like Mike Evans, Dalton Reisner, who are doing great things through their foundations, and just kind of trying to follow suit. Zaire Franklin is doing great stuff too. So just kind of trying to follow suit and with our foundation, and just provide the help that is necessary, but most importantly, providing the gospel through that help.
Yeah, that's really good. It's called the Stewardship Foundation, which Stuard is Stuard SHIP, stewardship, play off of your last name, Grant Stuard. This
Yes,
was
sir.
one of the best conversations I've ever had with an athlete. I mean that. We went over an hour, and we usually go about 30 minutes. And I mean that when I say this was awesome, because we got to go deep into some topics, and you shared a lot from your heart. And you can come back on this show anytime. And you need to get your own show. Then you need to get a pulpit where you can preach, because you got a message, a couple words that you can preach. You can keep making music and obviously keep tackling guys like Derrick Henry for a living as well. So thanks, Grant. Thanks for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for watching today on Sports Spectrum. Make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos. And if you want more stories on sports and faith, check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.